The International Criminal Court recently ruled that it will admit recanted evidence in the case against Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto. That decision has sparked a fresh round of anxiety among politicians from the nation's ruling Jubilee Alliance. The ruling followed an application by ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda 4 months ago, asking that the statements of 16 prosecution witnesses who succumbed to improper influences and either recanted or refused to testify in court be admitted as evidence against Deputy President Ruto. Well, for some insight on the ICC Ruto case, Charles Jalloh, an ICC observer and associate law professor at Florida International University, joins me live via Skype from Miami. Professor Jalloh, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent, for having me.
Yes. Now, first, one thing one may want to get some clarification. How is it that evidence that had been initially deemed unfit to be used by prosecution can now be brought back and become credible?
Well, I think we have to look at the evolution of the case. As you know, as you pointed out in the lead, the prosecutor had some difficulties in Kenya because of interference with witnesses. So basically, they had taken some statements before that they're now seeking to bring back in because the witnesses are either recanted or no longer willing to testify.
Now, if those witnesses are adamant they will not testify for whatever reason, whether it is coercion or fear, can that evidence really, at the end of the day, help the prosecution?
Well, this is a big question that the folks that have been watching this issue are asking. Basically, this step that we saw in the court in the decision is basically to just say we can bring the evidence in because it seems relevant. There will be a separate question as to whether the judges will deem it credible enough to use it for the purposes of determining the ultimate outcome as to the guilt or innocence of an accused person. So really, this is just a preliminary step in the process. It's no guarantee that the judges will use the evidence at all. The judges are not required to use any type of evidence if they don't find it credible.
In Kenya right now, there's a lot of political posturing, a lot of theatrics and drama around, the support being drummed up for Mr. Ruto. From your knowledge of how the court operates, does it matter really what's going on the ground in Kenya?
In many ways, it doesn't, to be honest. I mean, part of the political posturing that's happening in Kenya is just political posturing. The legal position remains the same. These particular accused persons that happen to be from Kenya are before the court. Their trial would conclude at some point, and the judges will go back and look at all the evidence to see if it meets the standard of beyond reasonable doubt, which is a very, very high threshold that the prosecutor must meet. So what's happening in Kenya really is primarily at this point theatrics. Political theatrics is not going to change the legal outcome necessarily. Now,
from your analysis, does this look good for the ICC, or again, it's one of those situations which might just drag on and on?
Well, I think the decision that was issued by the court is the correct one. So the process has to continue, again, keeping in mind that this evidence that they're bringing in at the moment is only being brought in so the judges can assess it. Later on, they will look at whether it's credible enough evidence for them to use towards determining the culpability of an accused person. So in the end, I think it's a step forward for the prosecution side. Obviously, the defense is unhappy with it and they've appealed. So we'll see what the appeals chamber says. But assuming the appeals chamber maintains the decision, then it's going to be interesting to see. We will see the end of the conclusion of the trial probably fairly soon, and it will be interesting to see what the judges find afterwards.
Professor Jalloh, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you so much, Vincent.
Professor Charles Jalloh is an ICC observer and associate law professor at Florida International University. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out all headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. I also want to hear from you. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori.